The auction block reeked of disinfectant and fear. Torin Krav adjusted his breathing apparatus, the filtered air tasting metallic against his tongue. Around him, the diverse crowd of the Galactic Trade Hub bustled with activity, six-limbed Varadi merchants haggling over cargo manifests, crystalline Zari floating serenely above the crowd, and the ever-present Drakian security forces with their scaled hides gleaming under the artificial lights. None paid attention to the small side auction happening in the corner of the vast market. This wasn't where valuable commodities changed hands. This was where desperation met opportunity, where things of little value found new purpose, or met their end. Next item, the Drakian auctioneer hissed through translator implants. Human female. Approximately 28 standard cycles. No registered modifications. No registered talents. Basic language package installed. Starting bid, 50 credits. Torin narrowed his eyes. The human stood with unusual poise for a species condemned to commodification after their failed resistance against the consortium. Most humans at auction slumped in defeat, but this one, she stood straight, eyes forward, something burning behind them. No one bid 45 credits, the auctioneer tried again, tail twitching with irritation. Silence. 30 credits, final offer before processing. Processing was a euphemism for organ harvesting. Even with humans considered primitive, their biological components had some medical applications. Torin raised a finger. 30. The auctioneer's vertical pupils dilated with surprise at finally receiving a bid. Sold to the Krivari in the back. Collection at processing gate 7. 30 credits was nothing, less than a decent meal at any establishment in the hub. Torin hadn't planned to purchase a human today, but his upcoming job required traversing human-controlled wilderness on Tyrannis 4. Having a native guide would increase his chances of locating Beneth Rowe, the fugitive with the substantial bounty on his head. At Collection Gate 7, Torin assessed his purchase more closely. She was lean but not malnourished, with copper-brown skin and close-cropped dark hair, practical for someone who'd lived rough. The neural translation band around her neck was standard issue, nothing fancy. Your designation? He asked, his gravelly Krivari voice softened by years of interspecies communication. They called me 41J, she replied, then added, I call myself Alara. Torin blinked his secondary eyelids in surprise. Most humans accepted their numeric designations. Alara it is. I'm Torin Krav, bounty hunter. I require your knowledge of Tyrannis 4 to track a fugitive. You paid 30 credits expecting expertise on a specific planet? A hint of amusement crossed her features. I paid 30 credits expecting nothing, Torin replied. But your file indicated capture near the Tyrannis system. Am I incorrect? Ilara's eyes, a striking amber that caught the artificial light, narrowed slightly. No. You're not incorrect. Torin led her to his docked vessel, a modified Krivari hunter ship named Ash Stalker. Unlike the sleek consortium crafts or the organic Varadi vessels, his ship was all-function, reinforced hull, upgraded propulsion, and weapon systems disguised as navigation arrays. You'll sleep there, he pointed to a small alcove as they boarded. We depart in 20 minutes. There's water and nutrition cubes in the dispenser. Ilara surveyed the ship with unexpected interest, eyes lingering on the navigation controls and weapon systems. Impressive for a solo operator. I'm not looking for approval, Torin said, dropping into the pilot's seat. No, Ilara replied, something subtle shifting in her demeanor. But you might be looking for survival. And on Tyrannis 4, that's going to take more than a bounty hunter's instincts. Torin glanced back at her, suddenly wondering if 30 credits had bought him more than he'd bargained for. Whether that was good or bad remained to be seen. As the Ash Stalker lifted from the docking bay, Ilara strapped herself in without instruction, eyes fixed on the stars beyond the viewports, a slight smile playing at the corners of her mouth. For the first time in years, Torin felt something he'd thought long dead: curiosity. The Ash Stalker cut through the void between stars, its engines humming with the strain of pushing past standard cruising speeds. Torin monitored the navigation console, making minor adjustments as the ship approached the Tyrannies system. "You're taking the Caldari Belt approach," Elara observed from behind him. "Most would avoid the asteroid field." Torin's ridge of spines stiffened slightly along his neck, a Krivari expression of surprise. "How do you know navigation patterns?" "I observe," she replied simply, moving to stand beside the pilot's chair. "And before I was." She gestured to the neural band around her neck. I worked salvage operations in 3 different systems." "Salvage," Torin repeated, skepticism evident in his tone. The official consortium position was that humans were incapable of complex technological work without supervision. Elara's amber eyes met his. "You believed what they told you about us." Before Torin could respond, proximity alarms blared. 3 sleek vessels appeared on the scanner, emerging from behind a nearby planetoid. "Consortium patrol?" Elara asked, gripping the back of his chair. "Worse. Raxus raiders." Torin's clawed fingers flew across the controls. "They hunt in these depths for isolated ships. Strap in." The Ash Stalker banked hard, diving toward the asteroid belt. The Raxus ships, built for speed and aggression, adjusted course in perfect formation, closing the gap with alarming efficiency. "They're herding us toward the field's densest section," Torin muttered. "Standard trap." Elara unstrapped herself, ignoring Torin's growl of disapproval. She moved to the secondary console, fingers hovering over the unfamiliar controls. "What are you doing?" Torin demanded, executing another evasive maneuver as energy weapons fire scorched past the viewports. "You can't outmaneuver 3 ships simultaneously," she said, voice suddenly calm and measured. "Your weapon systems are masked as NAV arrays, but they're still accessible. Give me access." "You can't possibly." A direct hit rocked the ship, cutting him off. "Either I die trying to help or we both die running," Elara said, eyes fixed on his. "Choose." With a curse in his native tongue, Torin pressed his palm against the biometric reader, granting her limited access. Immediately, her fingers began flying across the control surface with unexpected precision. "Isolating weapon signatures," she murmured. "Their lead ship is coordinating the formation through quantum band communications." Her eyes narrowed. "If we disrupt that." She activated a sequence, and the Ash Stalker's masked weapon array discharged, not at the raiders themselves, but at a specific point in space between them. The energy pulse detonated, creating a disruption field that momentarily severed the raiders' communications. The formation broke instantly, the ships veering in 3 separate directions as each pilot lost coordination with the others. "Now!" Elara shouted. Torin didn't hesitate, diving the ship toward the narrowest gap between 2 asteroids. The Ash Stalker scraped through with bare centimeters to spare, while behind them, one of the raiders miscalculated and clipped the edge of a massive asteroid, sending it into an uncontrolled spin. 10 minutes of tense maneuvering later, they emerged on the far side of the belt, scanners clear of pursuit. Torin leaned back in his chair, studying the human with new eyes. That wasn't salvage knowledge. Elara shrugged, but tension remained in her shoulders. "I never said salvage was all I did." "Who were you, before?" he asked, gaze lingering on the neural control band around her neck. Her expression hardened. "Does it matter? That person is gone now." They lapsed into silence as the ship continued toward Tyrannies 4, the blue-green planet gradually filling the forward viewports. But something had shifted between them, a reluctant respect taking root where only utility had existed before. As they prepared for atmospheric entry, Elara assembled a surprisingly comprehensive survival pack from Torin's limited supplies. "Tyrannies nights drop below freezing," she explained, packing thermal elements. And the indigenous fauna includes predatory species drawn to body heat. You seem very familiar with it for someone who was only captured near the system, Torin observed, securing his weapons. Ilara paused, then met his gaze directly. Because I wasn't just captured there. I lived there. For years. With the resistance. Torin's secondary eyelids flickered in surprise. The human resistance was crushed a decade ago. That's what the consortium wants everyone to believe, she replied, zipping the pack closed with finality. Just like they want everyone to believe we're worth nothing more than 30 credits at auction. The ash stalker broke atmosphere, clouds parting to reveal vast forests punctuated by the ruins of what had once been human cities. In the distance, a massive wall marked the boundaries of the consortium's containment zone, where the remaining free humans were corralled. Your target is hiding somewhere in those forests? Ilara asked, nodding toward the wilderness beyond the ship's viewport. Yes, Torin confirmed. Beneth Rowe. A consortium scientist who absconded with classified research. The bounty is substantial. Ilara's expression remained carefully neutral, but something flashed behind her eyes. And once you find him? Return him to the consortium, Torin said, watching her reaction closely. Dead or alive? She nodded once, face unreadable. Then we should get started. Tyrannies waits for no one. As they prepared to disembark, Torin found himself wondering, for the first time in his career, what secrets lay behind his quarry's disappearance, and why the consortium wanted him back so badly. More concerning still was the realization that he was beginning to care about the answer. The forest of Tyrannies foreclosed around them like a living entity, ancient trees towering hundreds of meters above the forest floor. Bioluminescent fungi cast an ethereal blue glow across their path as Torin consulted his tracking device. The signal's degraded, he muttered, tapping the screen in frustration. Something in the local environment is interfering. Ilara knelt, examining a broken branch with careful fingers. We don't need your tracker. He came this way, recently. 6 hours at most. Torin's ridge spines flattened against his neck, a sign of skepticism among Krivari. You're tracking a non-human through unknown terrain. Your Beneth Rowe may not be human, but he's being guided by one. She pointed to barely visible indentations in the soft ground. Those are human footprints, accompanying something heavier. Your target has found local help. They followed the trail for hours, descending deeper into a valley where the trees grew impossibly denser. The forest here felt ancient, undisturbed. Too pristine. This doesn't make sense, Torin said, stopping abruptly. Tyrannies was heavily developed before the war. There should be ruins, remains of human settlements. Ilara's expression tightened. There were. The consortium didn't just defeat us, they erased us. She gestured around. This forest? It's barely 20 years old. Engineered rapid-growth vegetation planted after they raised everything human from the surface. That's not the official history, Torin said carefully. History is written by the victors, Ilara replied, bitterness edging her voice. And we lost. A sound, barely perceptible, made them both freeze. Torin's hand moved to his weapon, but Ilara gripped his wrist, shaking her head in warning. She pointed upward, where a surveillance drone floated silently among the canopy, its optical sensors sweeping the ground below. They remained motionless until it passed, then Ilara pulled Torin into the hollow of a massive tree root system. Consortium patrols this deep in the wilderness? Torin whispered. They're looking for something specific, she replied, eyes fixed on the direction the drone had gone. Or someone. My target. Maybe. Maybe not. Ilara hesitated. There's something you should know before we go further. The resistance, what's left of it, operates from a hidden facility near here. Torin's secondary eyelids flickered rapidly. You're telling me this why? Because I think that's where your scientist is headed. And I think I know why. She met his gaze directly. The question is, are you still planning to collect your bounty when you find out what he's carrying? Before Torin could respond, the ground trembled beneath them. Not an earthquake, this was rhythmic, mechanical. They peered cautiously from their hiding place to see a massive consortium harvester moving through the forest, its bladed front end systematically uprooting and processing trees. They don't normally harvest this sector, Elara whispered. They're clearing the area. Searching. Torin watched as the machine devoured ancient trees with terrifying efficiency. We need to move. They skirted the harvester's path, staying low and using the undergrowth as cover. After another kilometer, Elara stopped at what appeared to be a sheer rock face covered in vines. Here, she said, pulling aside the vegetation to reveal a narrow fissure in the stone. Quickly. Inside, the fissure widened into a passage that sloped downward, carved steps appearing as they descended deeper. Torin's heightened senses detected the subtle signs of habitation, filtered air, the distant hum of machinery, the faint scent of multiple beings. The passage opened into a cavernous space that took even Torin's breath away. The underground complex was a marriage of ancient cave systems and advanced technology, much of it bearing the unmistakable aesthetic of pre-war human design. And it was populated. Humans moved purposefully through the space, dozens of them, engaged in what appeared to be scientific and military operations. None wore neural control bands. Welcome to Sanctuary, Elara said quietly. The last free human settlement on Tyrannies 4. Heads turned as they entered, conversations falling silent at the sight of a Krivari bounty hunter in their midst. Hands moved to weapons. He's with me, Elara announced, her voice carrying unexpected authority. Several people relaxed marginally, though suspicion remained thick in the air. An older human with silver-streaked dark hair approached them, his eyes hard as they assessed Torin before turning to Elara. You returned, he said simply, embracing her briefly. When you were captured, we feared the worst. It takes more than a consortium slave collar to keep me down, Commander Valen, she replied, touching the neural band at her throat. Is the tech lab still where it used to be? We need to get this off me. The commander nodded, then fixed Torin with a penetrating stare. You bought her? For 30 credits, Torin confirmed, meeting the human's gaze without flinching. Best investment I've ever made. A ghost of a smile crossed Valen's weathered face. Come. Both of you. There's someone you need to meet. They followed him through the complex to a laboratory where a blue-skinned Altosian was hunched over a workstation, deep in conversation with two humans. The alien scientist looked up as they entered, compound eyes widening in recognition. You found us, he said, rising. I was beginning to think my trail was too obscured. Beneth Rowe, I presume, Torin said flatly. The scientist inclined his head. The very same. Though I suspect the consortium's bounty description fails to mention why I fled. He gestured to the workstation, where complex molecular structures rotated in a holographic display. Or what I took with me. Commander Valen stepped forward. Dr. Rowe has brought us evidence of the consortium's true plans for Tyrannies 4 and the remaining human populations. The Altosian activated a larger display, showing a satellite view of the planet. Red zones pulsed across the surface, areas of consortium activity. This isn't containment, he explained. It's systematic extermination. The harvesters aren't just clearing forests, they're dispersing microscopic synthetic organisms programmed to target human-specific DNA signatures. They're terraforming Tyrannies, Elara said quietly. Removing us from the equation entirely. Precisely, Beneth confirmed. But in their arrogance, they've overlooked something crucial. He turned to Elara. Your family line carries the key to stopping this, a genetic immunity to their synthetic predators, and something more. Ilara's amber eyes widened. My family? But they're gone, yes. Except for you. The scientist studied her with open fascination. You carry a rare genetic marker, one deliberately engineered by your ancestors before the war. A final insurance policy against extinction. Torin looked between them, pieces falling into place. That's why the bounty on you is so high, he said to Beneth. You didn't just steal research, you stole their extinction plan. And discovered their greatest fear, the scientist added, turning back to Ilara. A human who could interface directly with the planetary defense systems your ancestors built, systems the consortium hasn't been able to access or destroy. Commander Valen's expression was grim but determined. Now you understand why she's worth more than 30 credits, bounty hunter. The question is, what is she worth to you? Torin looked at Ilara, seeing her not as property or even as an ally, but as something he'd never expected to find, a cause worth fighting for. Everything, he said simply. What do you need me to do? The neural control band fell away from Ilara's neck, leaving a pale ring of scarred skin beneath. She rubbed the area, relief washing over her features as she took her first truly free breath in months. Better? Torin asked, standing nearby as Dr. Beneth Rode disposed of the disabled device. You have no idea, she replied, rolling her shoulders as if shedding an invisible weight. Those things don't just control movement, they dampen cognitive function. Keep us manageable. Torin's ridged spines rippled with disgust. I didn't know. Most don't. It's by design. Her amber eyes met his. Thank you. For bringing me here, even if it wasn't your intention. Commander Valen interrupted their moment, entering the laboratory with a purposeful stride. We've detected increased consortium activity on the surface. 3 more harvesters deployed to the western quadrant, and their command ship has entered low orbit. They're accelerating the timeline, Dr. Rowe said, his blue skin paling to a washed-out azure. We have perhaps 2 days before their synthetic agents reach critical dispersal levels. Then we move tonight, Valen decided. He turned to Ilara. Are you ready to attempt the interface? She straightened, something ancient and resolute settling behind her eyes. Yes. The commander nodded. Good. Torin, your knowledge of consortium security protocols could prove invaluable. Will you assist our infiltration team? Torin considered his position carefully. Every instinct honed through years as a bounty hunter urged caution, he was aligning himself against the most powerful political entity in the galaxy. Yet looking at Ilara, he found his decision had already been made. I'll help, he said simply. Preparations moved swiftly after that. The Resistance had clearly been planning this operation for months, if not years. Torin found himself impressed by their discipline and resourcefulness. These weren't the primitive rebels the consortium propaganda portrayed, they were organized, strategic, and dangerously intelligent. As twilight fell over the surface above, Ilara found Torin in a quiet corner of the complex, where he was modifying his weapons for the coming mission. You could still leave, she said, leaning against the wall beside him. Take the Ash Stalker and be halfway to the next system before anyone realized you were gone. Is that what you expect me to do? He asked, not looking up from his work. It would be the rational choice. The profitable one. Torin set down his tools and turned to face her. There are different kinds of profit. Something shifted in her expression, vulnerability replacing her usual guardedness. Why did you really buy me, Torin? 30 credits is nothing to you, but still. Why? I told myself it was pragmatism, he admitted. But I think something in you called to something in me. Something I thought was long dead. And what was that? Hope, he said quietly. The idea that maybe everything isn't already decided. That the powerful don't always win. Elara stepped closer, her hand rising to touch the ridged texture of his face with gentle curiosity. Torin remained perfectly still, allowing her exploration as her fingers traced the contours of his alien features. "I never thought I'd trust someone like you," she whispered. "Someone not human?" She shook her head. "Someone who ever saw humans as things to be bought and sold." "I was wrong," Torin said simply. "About many things." The distance between them disappeared as Elara leaned forward, pressing her lips against the smooth patch of skin below his eye ridge, a kiss translated across species. Torin's hand came up to cradle the back of her head, his clawed fingers surprisingly gentle against her scalp. Their foreheads touched, breath mingling in the small space between them. For a moment, the coming battle seemed distant, unimportant compared to this unexpected connection that defied all logic and circumstance. "If we survive this," Torin began. "When," she corrected softly. "When we survive this." A subtle alarm sounded throughout the complex, breaking their moment. Commander Valen's voice came over the communication system. "Infiltration team, assemble at Departure Bay 1. Operation begins in 30 minutes. They separated reluctantly, eyes holding a promise for later, if later came. The plan was audacious in its simplicity. While the main resistance force created a diversion at one of the harvesters, a smaller team would infiltrate the ancient human defense facility buried deep within Tyrannisa's northern mountains. If Elara could activate the system and prove her genetic interface capability, they might have leverage to force the consortium into negotiations, or at the very least, buy time to evacuate the remaining free humans. The journey to the northern facility was tense, their transport skimming just above the treetops to avoid detection. Torin sat beside Elara, watching as she closed her eyes in meditation, preparing herself for whatever awaited them. "What does it feel like?" he asked quietly. "This genetic connection you have?" Her eyes opened, focusing on some middle distance. "Like remembering something I never actually experienced. Like voices just at the edge of hearing." She looked at him, uncertainty flickering across her features. "What if I can't do it?" Torin took her hand, his larger fingers enveloping hers. "Then we find another way. Together." The transport landed in a clearing near a sheer cliff face. According to ancient maps, the defense facility entrance was hidden somewhere along its surface. As they disembarked, the night air carried the scent of ozone, electrical discharge from distant consortium harvesters. "We have to hurry," Commander Valen urged, leading them toward the cliff. "The diversion team reports heavy resistance. They won't be able to hold attention for long." Elara approached the rock face, running her hands over the weathered stone with focused intensity. She moved as if in a trance, following some invisible guide until she stopped at an unremarkable section. "Here," she said with certainty. At her touch, ancient mechanisms stirred to life. A seam appeared in the solid rock, widening to reveal a passage that hadn't been opened in decades. Stale air rushed out to meet them. "How did you know?" Torin asked, amazed. Elara's smile held a hint of wonder. "I told you. Like remembering something I never experienced." They entered the facility, lights activating automatically at their presence. Unlike the Resistance's repurposed cave system, this was pure human engineering from before the war, sleek, advanced technology that put lie to the consortium's claims of human inferiority. At the heart of the complex lay a circular chamber dominated by a raised platform. Conduits ran from it into the walls and floor, connecting to systems that extended throughout the planet. "The interface," Dr. Rowe breathed, examining the platform with scientific reverence. "Just as the historical records described it." Elara approached it slowly. "What do I do?" "Your genetic code is the key," the scientist explained. "Place your hands on the designated areas and connect." She stepped onto the platform, where handprint outlines glowed with soft blue light. Torin watched, heart pounding with an emotion he couldn't name, as she placed her palms against the ancient technology. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Light surged through the conduits, racing away from the chamber and throughout the facility. Ilara gasped, her back arching as information flooded through her. Ilara. Torin moved toward her in alarm, but Valen held him back. Wait, the commander urged. She's doing it. Ilara's eyes flew open, but they were different now, luminous with the same blue energy that coursed through the facility. When she spoke, her voice echoed with harmonics that weren't entirely her own. I can see everything, she whispered in wonder. The entire defense grid. The planetary systems. And... Her expression shifted to one of horror. The consortium ship. It's preparing to release the final stage dispersal agents. We have minutes, not hours. The facility trembled around them as long-dormant systems awakened to her command. Outside, they knew, defensive emplacements would be rising from their hiding places across the planet's surface. Can you stop them? Valen asked urgently. Ilara's glowing eyes focused on something only she could see. Yes, she said, power resonating through her voice. But not alone. Her gaze found Torin, hand extending toward him. I need you, she said simply. Your strength. Your belief. Without hesitation, he stepped onto the platform and took her offered hand. The moment their fingers intertwined, the blue energy surged between them, encompassing them both in its glow. And in that moment of connection, as their minds touched through the ancient human technology, what had begun as a simple transaction of 30 credits transformed into something that would reshape the fate of worlds. The consortium command ship loomed in Tirani's IV's atmosphere like a dark promise, its weapons primed and dispersal systems ready to deliver the final solution to what they called the human problem. Inside the vessel, alarms suddenly blared as sensors detected unexpected energy signatures planetside. Impossible, the Drakian fleet commander hissed, scales bristling as data scrolled across multiple screens. Those systems were neutralized decades ago. Meanwhile, deep within the ancient facility, Torin and Ilara stood as the nexus of a growing storm of power. Blue energy coursed around them, through them, binding them together in ways neither had imagined possible. In Torin's mind, Ilara's presence bloomed like a sun. I can see through your eyes, her thoughts whispered across their connection. The galaxy as you've known it. So vast. And I through yours, he responded, overwhelmed by the depth of human emotion, memory, and resilience flowing through her consciousness. You've endured so much. Around them, Commander Valen and Dr. Rowe watched in awe as the facility systems responded to their joined connection, displays lighting up with planetary defensive grids long thought destroyed. She's bringing everything online, Beneth breathed. Not just this facility, but all of them. Ilara's physical body trembled with the strain, but her mind remained steady within the interface. Through their connection, Torin lent her his strength, his stability, his unwavering support. The dispersal ships are launching, she communicated urgently. I need to. We need to, Torin corrected, tightening his grip on her hand. Together, they directed the ancient defense system. Across Tirani's 4, long-dormant weapons platforms emerged from their hiding places, some from beneath the engineered forests, others from mountain peaks and ocean depths. They targeted the smaller vessels deploying from the command ship with precision that belied their age. In orbit, the consortium fleet commander watched in disbelief as his dispersal craft exploded one after another, destroyed by weapons that shouldn't exist. Launch everything, he ordered, rage contorting his reptilian features. Sterilize the entire northern continent. Within the facility, Ilara sensed the shift in consortium strategy. They're targeting us directly now, she warned. Military-grade weaponry. Can we stop it? Torin asked. A smile touched her lips, both physical and within their shared consciousness. We can do better than that. Through their joined minds, they activated the facility's most powerful system, not a weapon, but a transmission array designed to broadcast across all consortium frequencies simultaneously. As orbital weapons prepared to fire on their location, Ilara's voice, amplified and enhanced by ancient technology, reached every consortium ship and outpost. Attention Galactic Consortium. This is Ilara Valen, daughter of Earth, speaking from Tyrannies 4. Her voice carried power that transcended her physical form. Your plan to eradicate humanity has failed. The defense systems you thought destroyed are now active and under our control. She paused, and Torin felt her drawing on his knowledge of consortium protocols and vulnerabilities. We have just transmitted evidence of your attempted genocide to every independent world and competing alliance in the sector, she continued. Your harvester ships are now disabled. Your command vessel's weapon systems are locked. This is not a negotiation, it is a reckoning. In orbit, the fleet commander watched in horror as his ship's controls became unresponsive, systems shutting down one by one. On the ground, Ilara guided Torin through the final phase of their plan. Together, they activated a dormant satellite network that began broadcasting the truth about Tyrannies 4 and humanity's treatment to every corner of the galaxy, including undeniable proof of the consortium's planned extermination. It's working, Torin observed through their connection. But the strain on your system. I know, she acknowledged. No human was meant to channel this much power for long. Fear gripped him. Ilara, you have to disconnect. Not yet, she insisted. One last thing. Through their bond, he felt her reaching deeper into the planetary systems, activating something ancient and powerful buried at Tyrannies' core. The entire facility hummed with energy as a final protocol initialized, one designed by her ancestors as the ultimate insurance policy. What is she doing? Commander Valen asked, bracing himself as the floor trembled beneath them. Dr. Rowe studied the readings with widening compound eyes. Something extraordinary. The entire planet is awakening. Across Tyrannies 4, the engineered forests began to shift and change as dormant genetic codes activated within their cellular structure. The rapid growth vegetation the consortium had planted after raising human settlements was itself being transformed by hidden programming embedded decades earlier by human geneticists, a biological countermeasure designed to regenerate what had been destroyed. Within their shared consciousness, Ilara showed Torin the final truth. They didn't just take our homes, they tried to erase our very existence from the universe. But my ancestors planned for this. They hid our legacy in the building blocks of life itself. The strain was becoming unbearable. Ilara's physical form began to flicker with energy, the human body never meant to channel such power. Torin felt her slipping away. Don't leave me, he pleaded, his consciousness wrapping protectively around hers. I'm trying, she assured him, but her mental voice was fading. Help me find my way back. Torin did something then that went against everything he had ever known or believed. He opened himself completely, every memory, every emotion, every part of his being became a beacon for her to follow home. In that perfect vulnerability, he offered what he had never given anyone, his trust, his heart, his future. Come back to me, he called to her through their bond. The person I bought for 30 credits and who proved to be beyond all value. The energy surge reached its peak, then began to subside. Slowly, painfully, Ilara's consciousness disentangled from the ancient systems, following Torin's unwavering presence back to her physical form. When the blue glow finally faded, she collapsed into his arms, exhausted but alive. Her eyes, when they opened, were her own again, amber and warm and wonderfully human. Did it work? She whispered. Commander Valen approached with a portable display showing real-time feeds from around the planet. See for yourself. The images were astounding. The engineered forests were transforming before their eyes, revealing long-buried human structures as the modified vegetation retracted and reformed. Consortium harvesters stood frozen and powerless across the landscape. And in orbit, additional ships were arriving, not consortium reinforcements, but vessels from independent worlds and rival alliances, drawn by the broadcast. "You've changed everything," Valen said, voice thick with emotion. "After today, humans will never again be seen as commodities to be bought and sold." Dr. Rowe approached, his blue features solemn. "The consortium's ruling council is demanding to speak with the human who activated the planetary systems. They're calling for negotiations." Ilara, still leaning heavily against Torin, straightened as much as her exhaustion would allow. "Tell them humanity accepts their surrender, and nothing less." Hours later, as medical staff attended to her recovery, Torin sat beside Ilara's bed, his larger hand enveloping hers. "You should be there," she said, nodding toward the command center where the first diplomatic talks were underway. "You understand their protocols better than anyone." "I'm exactly where I need to be," he replied simply. A small smile touched her lips. "What happens now? To us, I mean." Torin considered the question. "I'm technically unemployed. Bounty hunting for the consortium no longer seems like a viable career path." "I might have a position for you," she teased weakly. "Humanity's going to need representatives who understand the wider galaxy." "Is that a job offer or a proposition?" he asked, ridged spines rippling with amusement. "Both," she said, eyes serious despite her smile. "I don't know what this is between us, Torin, but I know it's worth exploring." He leaned forward, pressing his forehead gently against hers in the gesture that had come to mean so much to them both. "The best investments often start small," he murmured. 30 credits, for instance." Ilara's laugh was soft but genuine. "Who would have thought that being sold for pennies would lead to this?" "Not a sale," Torin corrected, his voice low and certain. "A beginning." Outside the medical bay, through reinforced windows, they could see the transformed landscape of Tyrannies 4. Where engineered forests had stood, the ruins of human cities were being uncovered, ready to be rebuilt. In orbit, consortium ships were withdrawing as the terms of humanity's unexpected victory were negotiated. And on a small table beside Ilara's bed sat a disabled neural control band, a reminder of how far they had come, and how much had changed, since a weary bounty hunter had raised his finger at an auction block and bid 30 credits for what would prove to be beyond all measure of value.